Hey heretics, today we're diving into the nightmare fuel that is the Bible, dun dun dun, and how God is totally chill, killing just like 42 kids on a whim. Now remember, as we're reading, that according to Hebrews 13:8, the Bible tells us that God is the same today, yesterday, and forever. He is unchanging. So keep that in mind as we crack open 2 Kings 2:23 through 25 NIV. Let's dive in and learn the very, very important lesson of not making fun of a prophet of God. Should I be scared? A little too late for that, I guess. 2 Kings 2:23 through 25 NIV. From there, Elijah went up to Bethel. As he walked along the road, some young men came to the town and mocked him. "Get out of here, Baldy!" they shouted. "Get out of there, Baldy!" A-grade humor there. Elijah turned around and looked at them, and he cursed them in the name of the Lord. Then 2 bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the boys. Very fair and level-headed response given by a man of God. 42 kids. That is such an egregious number of children that were mocking him to begin with, but then had them mauled by bears because he didn't like it? What kind of playground justice is that? Not very pro-life of you, God, there. I mean, killing 42 kids doesn't seem like you really care much about children or life in general. And he went to Mount Carmel, and from there returned to Samaria. So just moving on from the mass murder real quick. Turning around the corner. I mean, that's what Paul did too when he decided that he was going to become a Christian and forget that he had murdered all those other Christians. So at least it tracks. Yikes. Apparently, disrespecting a prophet of God could have very deadly consequences. I would be scared if I wasn't 100% sure that God wasn't real. Honestly, it's not surprising to me that because one of the big reasons I left that religion in the first place was because I thought God was such a crappy God before I even thought he wasn't real. I did not want to worship a kind of God who would kill 42 kids because they didn't agree with him and made fun of him. I don't understand why people would want to worship that God. It's really creepy. It's not very loving, in my opinion. The Hebrew word that's used for that term young boys in 2 Kings 2:23 is actually a 2-word phrase. I'm going to pronounce it wrong, so I apologize. It's naram gatan. The first word literally translates to young men or youths, and it can refer to a lot wider range than just children and can encompass teenagers or young adults as well. Quatan, which means young or small, which is very interesting with such a harsh punishment coinciding with that, especially with the person who is praying for their downfall is a man of God. The prophet is the one that is upset and asks God to curse them. And as a prophet of God, he knows what that means. Cursing people was no big deal. It wasn't like you were sticking up your middle finger because you were pissed. It was God destroying their life. So this prophet of God wanted to destroy these kids' lives for making fun of him, for calling him bald. Yeah, that seems about right. And God obliged. God obliged. It wasn't just that this man wanted this horrible thing and he must have been walking away from God, but God heard his cries and was like, yeah, I'll follow through on that. I'll send some bears out and kill these 42 kids. That's some God shit right there. It's really unfortunate though, because I can see this story being used by abusive individuals that were in the Christian fundamentalist church that I was in growing up. Using this story as one of many, many excuses to hurt the children, their children a lot of times in their own life, for them just being disrespectful in some way to them. Whether that was real or not, it should never be okay to hurt kids. Whether they're disrespecting you or not, you still should not hurt or murder kids. I don't think that should be a hard thing to say, and that's really sad if our morality is this low. Now, there is some debate on the historical context of the story, because Bethel, the city mentioned in the story, was really known for worshiping idols, which is something that the God of the Bible hates a lot and spends a lot of time in the Old Testament tearing down, getting mad at, and killing people about. It's kind of what most of the Old Testament was killing people and tearing down idols. Some scholars believe that the young boys might be reflecting a rebellious nature of the city as more of a metaphor of God conquering those people's rebellious pagan ways. So instead of seeing it as a literal story of a prophet of God attacking children, it's more of a metaphor of God killing the rebellion and childish insolence in the city. It's better, but I don't know how much better it is than the first one. Now, this story, a lot of times when it's seen as a metaphor, it can be seen as a way to emphasize the importance of respecting prophets and warning against the dangers of idol worship. That's the propaganda tool that it's supposed to push forward, or that's the moral that it is supposed to be teaching, hypothetically. But it can't be seen as God caring much for these children's lives. It could maybe be seeing that God cares a lot about respecting his prophets. It can be seen as God really caring a lot about worshiping him and not worshiping idols. But God does not care a lot about these 42 kids' lives, especially if you're taking it literally. If you think this is a literal interpretation of the story and not a metaphor, then God very much emphasizes, in my opinion, either way, but definitely literally, that him being worshipped alone with no other gods and his prophets being honored is more important than children's lives. Other biblical scholars say that these were not actually children and the mauling might not actually killed them in any way. And that is their best case scenario. The best case scenario is that God attacked adults that were mocking him, not children, which I think is still really messed up and is still lives. So 42 lives, no matter what, were lost. And then on top of that, being mauled by a bear versus being killed by it, I think that in that time, being mauled by a bear would have been close to certain death. And if not, it was still incredibly messed up. I think that the problem is not that they are kids that were doing this. It's that making fun of any prophet should not lead to death. Making fun of someone should not have been righteously resolved with death. That's not righteousness and that's not justice. At least not anything I would call that. And if your God calls it that, I don't think your God's very just or good. So what's the takeaway here? Don't be rude to bald dudes. That God has a hair trigger temper, which he so does. Propaganda justifying killing others for making fun of their beliefs. Don't mess with our prophets. Is it a threat? What is this story trying to tell us? Do you think the story is literal or a metaphor? Maybe the real reason is the Bible is just full of contradictions. And these stories show that God is not the nicest, most loving God. It can be hard to grapple with and figure out who this person is even supposed to be when you care more about the lives of humans than God seems to. In my opinion, God cannot be both pro-life, caring about people's life in general, not even talking about abortion, just generally caring about humans' lives, and be the God of the Old Testament who very much focused on propaganding the positiveness of their genocides against other people in the name of God. And in my opinion, led to a lot of using God as an excuse to hurt other people. If you take the Bible fully literally, where this is not even just a really bad metaphor, why would you worship that God? Please put it in the comments below if you're watching this. Why would that be a God that you would want to worship? Is it because he's going to keep you safe from all the scary kids out there? Because I'm still here, so I don't know. I might just call you Baldy instead. Now, let me know in the comments below what you think about the story. Is there another way that you interpret it? And if you have your own favorite disturbing story from the Bible, please put that in the comments below. Maybe we can unpack it together in a future episode. Like and subscribe for more Bible horror stories. Until next time, heretics, remember to keep laughing through the apocalypse.